I quit. Before working at Ghostfire Gaming, I began my career in tabletop as a professional dungeon master. Essentially, groups paid me money to play D&D with them. And you've probably heard of this sort of thing before and may even have some opinions about whether professional GMing is something that's even good for the hobby. I'm going to try to answer some common questions about being a professional GM, whether it's something that you might want to try for yourself or something that you are passionately opposed to. But after 3.5 years of running my own business and earning money to play Dungeons and Dragons, I gave it all up. My name is Ben Byrne, and this is why I quit being a professional GM. First, a bit of background. I started GMing professionally back in 2018, having played D&D for about 12 months before then. There was a lot of demand for Dungeon Masters in my local area because 5e's popularity was growing, and I wanted to run more games as well. The problem was that there weren't enough hours in a week for me to run multiple game tables while also eating, sleeping, and working a job to pay bills and feed myself. But there was such high demand for game masters that groups were willing to pay me for my time, meaning that I could work less hours in my day job and play more D&D. In fact, I had so many groups reaching out to me, I actually had to contract out work to other GMs just to cover every group that wanted to start playing D&D. Pretty soon, I had a team of GMs running campaigns for private clients, in addition to helping me facilitate multi-table public events. And that all sounds pretty great, getting paid real money to play D&D almost every day. So why did I give it all up? Working as a professional GM changed my relationship with D&D. Playing tabletop RPGs wasn't something I could do to relax or socialize with my friends anymore. It became a job, and just like a job, I needed time away from it each week. Additionally, the folks that I was running most of my games for weren't my friends anymore. I was friendly with most of my clients and I still had a good time GMing for them. But the purpose of those games wasn't about me having fun anymore on any level. This channel pretty clearly showcases my preference for engrossing, dark, horror-inspired D&D campaigns. What most folks getting into D&D prefer is a light-hearted, high fantasy adventure over some beer and snacks. And that's great and completely valid. But when you're a professional game master, it isn't about you having fun. It's about making sure that your client is. That inherently makes it feel more like a job. Additionally, there were problem players, which can be more awkward to deal with when they're paying you for your time. If you have an intense min-maxer at your table, or someone who wants to steal from every NPC they encounter, it's probably better to just let them so that they have a good time. You can, of course, put up boundaries around what's allowed at your table. For example, whether torturing NPCs is something that you're willing to roleplay out, whether they're paying you or not. But as a professional facilitator, you might need to acquiesce to valid play styles that you personally find tiresome. Professional GMing also impacted my home game because I stopped wanting to play D&D with my friends. You were probably told as a kid by a parent or a teacher or somebody that if you ate ice cream for every meal, you'd eventually get sick of ice cream. And I kind of got sick of ice cream. It wasn't just running the game that I got tired of either. By the time I prepped my paid sessions, I didn't have the mental headspace left to further prep a campaign for just my home group. Not having the energy to tell stories with my friends anymore was heartbreaking. But it was also important to me that I wasn't charging my friends to play D&D with me because I still wanted those games to be for me as much as it was for them. I loved being a professional GM, but I was also disappointed that I wasn't having as much fun with D&D anymore. I lost something when my hobby became my job. Keep in mind as I discuss this is all within the context of living in Australia. Also, it's definitely not financial advice, just insight into my experiences. Is being a professional GM worth the money? Not really. Ultimately, it depends on how much you can charge your clients, the context of the games that you're running, and how many games that you can run each week. I was usually charging about $90 to $120 in Australian currency for a private 3-hour game, typically at a person's residence or a public play space like a friendly local game store. For context, most private entertainers doing equivalent work can make a minimum of $50 to $100 an hour, at least here in Australia. So I was undercharging pretty heavily. Additionally, a big bottleneck for me was that most folks only want to play D&D in the evening after they finished work or school, or on the weekends, and there are only so many evenings in a week. So if I was to run 5 or 6 games in a week, every week of the year, at let's say $120 a game, I could probably make $35,000 to $40,000 a year before tax and expenses. And that's maybe a livable wage here in Australia, but again, that's before your transport costs, your game materials like dice, printing costs, and keeping up with updated rules inside of new releases like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That came out right around the time I was professional GMing, and it kind of messed with me a bit because everyone wanted to play the new subclasses from that book, so I had to buy it and learn it very quickly. If you're playing online, you obviously have internet costs as well, subscriptions to VTTs if you want to use them, and also ensuring that your mic and camera setup is appropriate. None of this is to dissuade you from trying to be a professional game master yourself if it's something that you've been thinking about. While the income wasn't amazing, it was satisfying to still be able to pay bills with money that I'd earned from running games. And having that job actually saw me through several lockdowns. You'll get a lot of pushback from folks who feel that nobody should ever have to pay for a dungeon master. You might even be one of those folks. Leave me a comment. Tell me whether you think professional GMing is a valid revenue stream or it's just something that's taking advantage of new players. But for my part, I think it's a valuable service, especially for folks who don't have someone to teach them D&D or a group who wants to give their usual GM some time off. The trick to being a successful GM is actually focusing on the professional part. Show up on time. Never cancel a session yourself. Bring all the materials needed, including dice, paper, pencils. Have a session prepped and ready to run. Don't improvise unless you kind of have to because the players throw you a curveball. The most valuable thing about your service as a professional GM isn't necessarily your skill at running D&D. That's certainly part of it, and you should try to run as many games as you can to get your experience up. Volunteer to go to conventions and run games there for free, because not only does that get your experience up, but it will also increase your network and make more players familiar with you as a DM, therefore more likely to hire you. But what's actually most valuable is that you're always available when and where your group wants to play. You're never going to cancel a session on them because you don't feel like it or you're too busy that week. You're a professional. This is what you are paid to do. In terms of making this profession more financially viable for you, ultimately, there's only really 2 things you can do. You can increase the number of games you run, or you can increase the amount you're charging your clients. If I was to try pro GMing again today, I would maybe look at playing online much more and offer my services to international clients instead of just local ones. The evening in the United States is the morning here in Australia. So if I was to schedule a few US groups in the morning and local groups in the evening, I could double the games that I could run each day. You could invest in your own personal website for this, but there are also websites specifically for connecting professional GMs to client groups. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide. Maybe you don't even want to turn this into your full-time gig. It's just a little income on the side and an excuse to play more of the game that we all love. Have you ever run D&D for money before? What was your experience like? Was it similar to mine or much, much different? Are you still professional GMing and loving it? Are you opposed to professional game mastering and think that it is bad for the hobby? In the meanwhile, if you're new to the channel, you can join our ongoing campaign by subscribing, and liking this video helps a lot. You can get a better idea of my GMing style by checking out this video up here about running monster hunting quests that are actually fun. Or you can check out this video down here about running an evil D&D campaign if that's something else you've been thinking about before. And let me tell you, some of my client groups were evil.